everybody. It's Severine
and Firechild.
and no Ronnie today. What a crazy thing.
This is actually our first time recording as a duo, so it's a little exciting.
It's actually snowing outside today.
Yay!
Indifference. I take it back. I think snow is beautiful. I just wish it would snow like on a weekend when I don't have to go to work. Then I'd be so down. We'd go make snowmen and like do all the fun stuff. So on the branch of like nostalgic snow memories, I guess. Today we were going to talk about, I'm going to let Firechild introduce it. So you go ahead, you tell them.
You too. This is actually stemming from some conversations that I've had with both Severine and Ronnie, and it's something I've been thinking about. In short, we'll be talking about anecdotal accounts of nostalgia from past lives. By that, I mean you're sort of missing things that you experienced in past lives, even though you haven't experienced it in this life. You know the old adage, you can't miss what you never had. I do feel that it's possible to miss things from another life, because it's like I feel that there's a memory that's imprinted on the spirit as it passes from one life to the next, and some of these longings and some of these urges and the favorite memories and sometimes some of the worst will remain with us from life to life, and they'll be kind of subconscious, maybe subconscious little tics, subconscious fears. Some people actually believe this is the origin of phobias, such as being afraid of the dark. Perhaps in a past life you were locked away and you weren't allowed to see the light of day. Some people feel that such things as claustrophobia also stem from being confined in small spaces as part of perhaps torture or maybe some other form of imprisonment. But I thought that we'd talk about some of these inherent memories that we've kind of realized that we've carried over from our past lives, and just kind of explaining how we made that connection to the past life. So I figured I'd open up the floor and let Severine discuss some of her memories, because she's actually got some really interesting ones, and she can tell you about some of the very interesting lives that she's led.
So this is going to be kind of I think if you've watched any of our stuff that Ronnie and I have probably talked about, that we feel a strong connection to the Fae. And I sort of have, I did a reading for one of my crystals once, and it's been months now, but I've had this crystal for a really long time, and it's one of the crystals I feel probably the most connected to, as far as there's just a very strong relationship. It sits by my bed. It feels like there's a bond of sort of like, I like to hold this particular crystal a lot, and it's a titanium aura quartz that I actually have named Cloud Song, which is, if you guys have ever watched Riverdance, it's a song in Riverdance. And so one of the first nights I had him, I actually sang that song, and I sort of felt sort of this pulsation whenever I was singing it, and he seemed really excited, and so I was like, that's gonna be your name, little dude. It just felt fitting too. But anyway, so I was doing the reading, and during the reading, I noticed that, first of all, there were a lot of swords cards. And if you guys know about swords, like especially the the 9 of Swords and I think the 5 of Swords, those cards are typically like about sadness. And the longer I was doing the reading, it sort of was along the lines of that there was a regret and there was a feeling of not being able to be strong and in your comfort zone. One of the cards I remember specifically, the air element in my deck, which is Shadowscapes, is very representative of swans. So it's got a lot of swans in it, and for the air element, fire has a lot of foxes, and earth has a lot of chameleons, and of course water, cups has a lot of fish. So I was looking at the deck though, and this particular card that came out was a swan that was trapped within this briar bush, and the briars were tangled around the swan, and there was a hummingbird up in the top corner, and basically the hummingbird symbolized patience and guidance, and that it could actually see things that the swan could not. And so when I was doing this reading, especially since I felt really connected to this particular stone, it felt like to me that I needed to actually meditate with him. And when I did my meditation, I actually went on the astral plane, and I remember being there and there being sort of like being in an underwater cave, not in the sense that I was underwater, but the cave was actually under some sort of water, and then there was sort of this clear opening where the water was all around, but there was also like a sort of a bank or a beach or something like that, and there was a small cave on the beach, and I remember feeling very strongly, go to the cave. And so I went over and I actually got down on my knees, because at my height I was not tall enough to actually climb inside the cave or whatever, And I sat on the outside, and I remember looking in and seeing this little tiny fox kit, which I couldn't really make out very much because it was dark. But I could tell that his fur was blue, and he was mostly in shadow. And I sort of said that, I don't understand what's going on. And he just said, I'm just so embarrassed. I've been looking for you for so long, and it's all my fault. And I was like, well, what's your fault? And he said, I'll never fly again. And he came out and he had these wings that were, if you've ever seen titanium quartz, instead of feathers, it was crystals. Like it was like the protruding, what would you call it, like points of a crystal. And he was still little. And he came out of the cave, and he kind of just had this sort of downtrodden look and was really sad. And I touched him, and then as soon as I touched him, I remembered him flying in space as a pup and getting so excited and having this feeling of concern and overwhelming worry for him, and that I was chasing him through the sky. And I actually caught him in time to swing him out of the way right before a meteor hit me and threw me down to earth. And so, to my understanding of what happened, at some point I was Fae, and I was Fae royalty. And technically that soul is still within me, as far as I have memories of it, I don't remember everything, but I remember that. And I remember a couple of other things. So it's I'm not really just my own memories. I'm also recalling my past life, which I guess technically is still this life, but in a weird way. Sort of like I feel like when I was born, it was kind of like how amnesia is, where you don't remember that kind of thing. But what ended up happening while we were in that astral plane is that I realized that ever since he had that experience with me where he felt like basically to blame for that happening, he would never fly after that. And so I picked him up and I was like, there's nothing to be scared of. I'm here. I'm fine. It's okay. And, I worked with him until I finally got him to fly. And as soon as he started flying, he turned into a full-grown adult fox. But it was kind of crazy because, he was really small as a pup, but then he actually got what I would say is probably like the size of a lion when he was full grown. So I know that sounds so bizarre. But it was definitely just like when you have a memory of your childhood, or when you touch something or you see something. For example, my grandfather used to plant me sunflowers. So whenever I see sunflowers, there's sort of that nostalgic connection of like, oh, well, I have this great memory with my grandfather. We didn't have many moments like that, but that moment was really special to me. And so it was kind of in that same vein, which I've had other ones, but I feel like I've probably talked quite a lot about that one. So we can get back to me. And do you have any experiences like that?
Well, I've often found myself really nostalgic for different time periods from, well, all my life. I feel as though, oddly enough, I've missed certain times, such as the Renaissance, such as the Victorian era, such as the Roaring '20s. And I sit and I think, well, how can you miss something if you weren't there to see it? One of my first excursions into the astral plane ended up being a glimpse into a past life. I didn't realize that's what it was at the time. But the most recent one that happened in the '20s that I've actually seen images from, I seemed to be a well-off young lady. I remember that I liked to dance a lot, and I remember, I don't believe that I was particularly wealthy, but I feel like I was in a position where my family wasn't struggling, and I could just kind of focus on, everyday amusements, going to the theater and seeing the new shows, and it seemed really political. And then just the sense of being in a time where it felt like anything could happen, especially for a woman, just feeling free. And that's about as much as I've gotten. But I've noticed when I listen to music of that era, it tugs at my heart in a way that a fond memory does. So that sort of spoke to me on a level that would suggest that, well, maybe the reason that it speaks to me is because it reminds me of a person that I used to be. It reminds me of this life that I had. And then, of course, there's the Victorian era, going a little farther back. And again, I was a lady. I remember tight lacing, which was quite uncomfortable, but naturally at this point in time, that was just the order of the day. And I seemed to be better off in this particular time period because it seemed like I had nothing better to do than to stroll about town and get called upon and courted. And I just remember having a lot of idle time, and it seemed like even in that time I just feel like I was just wishing for something. I'm not sure what, but it's, it's just like I just sort of felt unfulfilled. And then there's a time, I don't think it was quite the Middle Ages, but maybe it was somewhere between then and the Renaissance. I wasn't much of anything in this particular life, but I remember walking through the woods, and I happened upon a tall, dark looks, sort of a dark humor about him. He was just, it was just a feeling of darkness about him. I wasn't afraid. I was actually quite intrigued by him, and I remember stopping sort of at a crossroads, and I asked him where he was going, and he told me that he was going to do some business and that he'd like to see me again one day. And he had a companion with him who was also pleasant on the eyes, but he had a sort of a cruel air about him. He didn't speak much. He just seemed sort of impatient with the other one for stopping to take time to bother with the peasantry. And the dark man, I felt like something seemed almost gentle about him, and something about that made me hope that I would see him again. And I just remember a smell, and I wasn't sure what it was. Just some kind of smell, a rich smell about him. And at the start of my awakening, I encountered an entity, some sort of spirit. I'm not exactly sure what he is, but I do know that he spent a lot of time with mankind. He's lived for a very long time. He's affluent in many languages, and he's experienced a lot of the great passages in human existence. He's borne witness to many of our greatest triumphs, and something seemed oddly familiar about him, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And then I remember hearing a lot of people talk about their familiars and how they found them and how their familiars have helped them. And I stopped and I would tell myself, I wish I could find, someone like that who would help me. And most people spoke of familiars in the term of an animal, a cat, a bear, a wolf. That sort of situation, and that's what I had in mind. And then I was going through a period of great personal upheaval. It was a very vulnerable time in my life, and I felt myself quite under attack very often. And this entity that I had met and who had decided to stay with me, he was always by my side and always encouraging me to get stronger and advising me in different things that I could do to improve my situation and grow wiser as a result of it. And I had a moment one day where I was in the astral plane, and I just stopped and I looked at him, and it's like one of those situations like you're seeing someone for the very first time. And I remember looking at him and saying, "It's you." And he just smiled at me. This was before I actually had the past life experience, but I looked at him and I said to him, "You're the one that I've been looking for." And he told me that after he encountered me in this life, he felt that he wanted to guide me, and so he stayed with me for a long time. He's been a whisper in the back of my mind that I wasn't sure what it was since childhood, just a friendly whisper through some difficult times. And then I had the past life experience and realized he and I had met before. He was that dark, entrancing traveler on the road who told me that he would see me again. And when I came back from that experience, I just couldn't believe it. And he seemed to have a sense about what I had seen and experienced, and he told me that he wasn't sure why, but he had been searching for something for quite a while, and he realized, that it was me, because he knew that I needed him. He knew that I needed him before I knew I needed him. So that's one of the strongest memories that I've had from a past life, but I feel like because of particular time periods that I've gotten glimpses from, it makes me miss things like Baroque and Gothic architecture, sort of closing my eyes and almost seeing some of these places as they would have been in the 16th century, in the early 17th century. And it makes me long and yearn for that. And the only word I can think to describe it is nostalgia, missing it. And once again, it sounds like it's crazy talk, because like I said, people have always said that you can't miss what you've never had, but I feel like I'm just starting to remember some things that I have had in past lives.
Well, I don't think it's crazy talk, because I feel, and going back to some of the nostalgia, for certain things, something about the Eiffel Tower is very nostalgic to me, and it feels, I don't know, I haven't really explored that life very much, but I know that I've had a lot of dreams and sort of memories of being in Victorian era France, I guess. And I don't think I was fairly well off, but I don't think I was married. I think I was fairly young, at least in my memory. And I sort of remember going and playing in this garden. And there being a tree that was near a river, and I feel like I used to sit there and read a lot. Like, there was a branch that sort of was kind of like a seat almost, I guess. So that's about, I'm not as familiar with that life as of yet, but I definitely, something about seeing the Eiffel Tower is very nostalgic to me, and I feel like, whenever I was there, I must have loved it a lot, and that must have been a place I really liked to visit a lot. But I definitely get the sense of some things just seem right. Renaissance has always felt that way for me.
Me too.
But yeah, I definitely get where you're coming from with that of, a lot of people will say, oh, well, you just kind of admired that place or whatever. And it's deeper than that. It feels deeper than that. It doesn't feel like, oh, I think this is a beautiful place that I'd love to go. It's like I have memories of being there. There's something about that. Something about Ireland, too, is very familiar to me. something about all that green and the hills.
Yeah, that's another one for me. I feel like once I explore the particular places that I resided in these times, if I can hone in on some kind of location, I feel like I'll find pieces of myself that I've set down. I feel like I'll feel more fulfilled in this life. It's a longing for wholeness for me. I just feel like maybe there were some things that I left behind that I meant for myself to find later. Maybe it was a lesson that I learned, or maybe it was something that I just left for later. Sort of like a little quest for this version of me to complete. And I really feel like that's part of the reason I've always been so keen to travel to certain places, because I feel like I'll just find something I've been missing all along.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me too. I feel like you never know when you go somewhere if you're gonna find something that just fits in with that.
Yeah. Which Ronnie actually told me a very interesting story, and it was one of the most vivid recollections from a past life, and it was pertaining to a bridge. And hopefully the next time that he's with us, I'll have him tell you guys that story. So be sure to bug him in the comments of this video and say, tell us a story, Ronnie.
Tell us about the bridge.
And
What bridge?
which I'm not sure how deeply he's explored. I do know that it wasn't a happy memory for him, but he's told me that he feels like he learned a lot about himself when he explored this more. And his is kind of along the line of a phobia actually being a fear of something that happened in a past life. So I think his story will be well worth hearing. But I know that a lot of other people have done past life regressions. So one of the memories that I have tapped into, they're not always so clear. It's not a full memory, but I have a sense that at some point I was very comfortable wearing armor, and that I was a man at this time, which I think, from what I've been told, that's kind of funny whenever you actually have vivid recollections of a past life where you are the opposite gender of what you are in the present. I'm not sure if it was medieval. I know that the wearing of armor was popular into the Renaissance, although it was more decorative than anything else getting into that time, up until gun warfare really became a big deal. But I feel like it was a time of great chivalry, and I know that we sort of romanticize that, but I feel like that idea of courtly chivalry was a big deal at that time. It's just a little snippet from a previous life, and I'm hoping that at some point I'll be able to delve deeper into more past lives, and maybe be able to recall more of who I was and what kind of person I was aiming to be.
You were Sir Lancelot.
Oh my! Does that mean that you were Guinevere?
I actually do feel connected in some way to that time period as well, but I don't really have a lot of memories that I would say I would think I was the opposite sex. I know that I have one of being a Roman at one time, but not like a bulky, awesome, more like one of those scholarly, I guess would be the correct word.
Please tell me you weren't Nero.
No, I was not. I was definitely not well off. I remember being present for somebody's crucifixion.
That's a lovely memory.
Yeah. It was a weird, like, and see, this is a past drive. Past drive. Ruby.
Oh no! Oh, she's awful. I'll tell you.
So in the 70s.
Oh my good.
I
Anyway.
recall being a dog.
Anyway.
And having this strange bunch of teenagers around me. And you were there, but you were high all the time.
Oh my god! Sad to say. Really sad to say. At some point in my life, I'm sure that wasn't a stretch. But back to the Roman era.
The life that you were Shaggy, clearly.
Back to the Roman area.
I actually had this past life recall when I was a child.
What?
Yes. And I remember it was like an entire day. This man went up to this other man, and they were outside of one of those really gorgeous architectural buildings. I guess it was a temple. It looked like a temple, like maybe to Athena or something like that. And they were talking.
That's Greek, dear.
Well, and so, what is her Roman equivalent? Is it Minerva?
Oh my! I think
Athena. I'm so sorry.
I think she was Minerva.
I think she was Minerva. If you know and you know we wrong, you tell us.
Please let us know in the comments below if she was not Minerva, because that was the first name that jumped in my head. But continue.
Yeah. Anyway, but it was definitely Rome. I do know that it was Rome, and they were talking, but they were talking about we've got to get rid of him or something like that, and then they walked off. And then I walked through the town, was doing my thing, chilling like a villain, whatever, And I walk up, and there's a crucifixion happening. And it wasn't just like one guy; it was like maybe, because they did them in like a group a lot of times. But then I walked off, and I went home, and I went to bed, and then I woke up, and I had like dinner with my family or whatever, but. It definitely felt like I was a little boy, so I feel like I didn't really have an understanding of whatever I was remembering, but I definitely was present for two men plotting against somebody, and I don't know, what it was.
Well, another thing that could explain the fact that it was probably kind of a hazy thing, you have to kind of sort of try to jump back into the psyche of people in that era, because unless you were a sympathizer of a particular cause or a particular group of people, it wouldn't be shocking for even a child to witness a crucifixion, because that was just the order of the day. It was part of public entertainment. It wasn't just something that they did, to teach someone a lesson. That's just like throwing criminals, into the pit with the lions. Yes, it's a fearsome lesson for anyone else who's, trying to be trying to disrupt the peace. Sadly, a lot of the time it's Christians that we hear about things like this happening to, but it was also a kind of entertainment, a very gruesome form, but also kind of entertainment. So yeah, if you woke up and you weren't absolutely horrified by what you saw, don't feel bad. Don't feel like that says anything about who you are now, because, like I said, in that time, it really wouldn't have been the most shocking thing you'd see.
I think I was more confused. I mean, I wasn't a little kid. I mean, I was about 8 or 9 when I had this dream, and it's weird. I think what's bizarre to me is like I had an understanding of it, but I shouldn't have, because I didn't really have a frame of reference to really know very much about Rome.
Well, in your head, the child that you were, it was probably a situation of, well, look at these heretics. So once again, I feel like that, you probably wouldn't have been surprised because the frame of reference that you would have had would have been suitable for a person of your era. And if you were older, if you were like 7 or 8, I'm pretty sure you were old enough, just like kids now in that age group. They're getting to where they're old enough to know what's going on around them. Children watch everything. They're like little sponges. They're absorbing and they're learning. So I'm sure, you would have had that much grasp that, well, they're just getting punished because they did something they weren't supposed to do.
Yeah, that was sort of how I felt like it was. I mean, I definitely I wasn't like grossed out by it or weirded out by it. I was like, oh, that's a crucifixion.
Wonder what they did today.
Yeah, what did they do?
Oh, well, it's just another Tuesday.
But it's a thing that I remember, and I mean, I think I have a lot of stuff like that because I have some dreams. Sometimes I feel like I'm in like an astral form traveling. Sometimes I feel like I'm actually remembering something from a past life, but it just depends. I mean, one dream I've had that I remember very vividly is being in a forest, and for some reason, and this is a nostalgia thing too, the forest is life for me. I don't know. Like, I love the woods, except at night. They're kind of creepy at night, but I love sunny day woods, and especially if there's like some body of water, like a river or a pond in said woods. Something feels nostalgic about that to me. In these particular woods, I remember coming through an area, and that woods are kind of like the trees are usually close knit together or whatever, and it got to a area where the trees were almost like patterns of like, they weren't super close together. It was like they were kind of at an angle so far apart or whatever. And then there was a big tree in the center of the woods, and in the tree was like a Victorian era treehouse.
Ooh.
But it was like the size of a Victorian era house. So it was like a big tree and a big Victorian era treehouse.
Before you mentioned that it was like the size of a regular house, I had this image of this. Oh goodness, what's the story called? The Swiss Family Robinson, I think. Yeah, I just had this image of this family that was shipwrecked, and they just built this house in the trees, and
that's a good movie. I like that movie. But no, it was like fancy Victorian era wood and stuff like that.
Ooh.
It wasn't like one of those bright colors that you see where it's like pink or red or whatever. It was more like a tan or brown with some white maybe kind of coloring going on. It was super pretty.
But which I think that once you start delving into it and understanding this for what it is, sort of having glimpses into past lives, it's probably something that you could spend days on end doing, but it was just a topic that I wanted to explore because I have a lot of experiences where I'm looking at a picture of Venice and it's like I can just see myself, on a gondola, and I can feel those waves just, the little ripples in the canals just lapping at the sides, and the sights and the smells, and just the people feeling familiar in a time gone by. I feel like things like that sort of, remind you of maybe who you used to be.
There's something definitely very familiar to me about Venice too. I have a collection of masquerade masks and stuff, and Venetian masks feel very nostalgic, I guess. And also the food. I want to go just for food. I feel like there's something about food. Pastries and all that stuff from Venice.
But yeah, that was what I kind of, wanted us to talk about tonight. If you've had similar experiences where you've had glimpses or full-on excursions into past lives, please, do a write-up and share that. Or maybe you can do a video, sort of a response video and link back to this one so that viewers can, check yours out, and you can tell us about some of the things that you've seen, some of the things that you remembered. Because I'd love for this to be a dialogue with people sharing, because I feel like that's the point of the human collective, or the collective consciousness. Once you've gotten some knowledge, I feel like it does everyone good to share it. It does us good as a species. It does us good as a community, because being pagan, a lot of times, it can feel very lonely. So I love the fact that people are so willing to share their walks in life, their walks in other lives, and just to keep this conversation going. So I hope that we'll get a lot of you to sort of get on board with this, and just share, because we love reading comments, and we love seeing response pictures. So maybe we can have some response videos.
Definitely do that, guys. We will link you.
I put it up on our Facebook page.
Yes. So thank you for spending some time with us this evening, and hopefully you'll join us for our next episode. We're not sure what it's going to be, but you be there, because
we're going to make Firechild talk more about her life as Shaggy.
Anyway,
you were really sleeping with Daphne behind Fred's back, weren't you?
Oh my God. See, I knew I couldn't trust that dog. I knew there was something shady about him.
Well, you're the one that had to do all your stuff in front of me.
Well, I didn't tell you to tell everybody either, but I guess when you started talking, I should have known that was going to be an issue. But anyway, merry part, everyone. Be safe, and hopefully we'll see you later.
Merry part.